Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos, the original four H's of gay podcasting, to discuss movies either current or classic. And this week we are going with a movie that is very much in the classic column. This movie is 40 years old. We are celebrating its big milestone birthday by reviewing it on our show. That film, of course, is 1982's Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford. Should be a great discussion. We all kind of refreshed ourselves on the movie. I'm looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts. And by everyone, I mean my wonderful co hosts, who I'll introduce here in just a moment, as well as folks who are with us in the live chat. We've already got a few with us on the line. Welcome. Hello. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to drop your comments into the live chat, and maybe we'll end up reading them on air. Just FYI. But let me introduce you to those co-hosts I mentioned a couple of moments ago. Jim Pugliafico is with us in the virtual studio. Hello, sweetheart. Love of my
Hello.
life. How are you doing?
Hey, babe. Thank you. I'm here. And yes, right. We are everyone. We are everybody. So, yeah, there's a Lost reference for you.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're here and ready to, we talk about like sometimes hitting on classic films. I think this one definitely qualifies, not just because of the fact it's 40 years old, but because of the fact it's one of the most beloved sci-fi films of the last several decades. So
Hmm.
I'm excited to talk about this one with you guys.
All right. Excellent. Well, so glad you're here. Yet another person I'm glad is here is William Lindis. Hey, Will, how are you?
I'm great. We talked a few times this year about some of the films that came out in 1982. 40-year celebration of these films. And 1982 was a really, really, really good year for film. It gave us, of course, the movie we're talking about today, which is Blade Runner. It gave us E.T. It gave us Conan, all of which we've talked about on the show. It gave us me. 1982 was a fantastic year. And so I'm just really happy to celebrate things that turned 40 this year.
Mm.
Indeed. It's a big milestone year for you as well, Will. I forget that you're like a year and a half behind me. I
That's
I'm gonna be the answer to life universe and everything this year. Well,
that's right.
in
Okay.
February. Yeah, the big 4-2.
Mhm.
So
Still a
I don't
baby.
know. I don't know what's turning 42 this year movie wise, but you know, we'll have to stick to the 40s. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. I think this is going to be a really good discussion. Something that I do just want to put on everyone's radar right at the start. We're going into the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States relative to when we are recording. Several movies are coming out over the Thanksgiving long weekend. If you want to see a couple films this weekend so that you can be current with the show when you tune in next week, a couple movies for you to see that we're going to be talking about next week are Strange World, as well as Bones and All. So, two movies for you. One is CGI animated, one is very much a live action film. We'll see which one is better, goodest, betterest, best. I don't know. We'll talk about it all next week. But make sure to do your movie homework over the Thanksgiving break. And if you're not in the United States and you're not celebrating Thanksgiving, it's probably just a normal weekend for you. But hopefully, you can get a couple movies in. So,
Mhm.
just be aware that's coming down the pipeline. Jim, Will, are you guys ready to kick up the synth soundtrack, get in our flying cars, and go track down some skin jobs?
Hey,
Oh, yeah,
I'm always down for a skin job.
sure.
All right.
Skin job would feel great right now.
So normally we talk about movies completely spoiler free for a little while, and then we give a spoiler warning. But since this movie has been out for 40 years, just a heads up, spoilers are going to be fair game right from the get-go of this discussion. So if you haven't seen Blade Runner yet, that's understandable. Not everybody has. Just know that we are going to be spoiling it because it is, a movie that has some longevity. It's been around for a little while. But if you haven't seen it, you may want to sit out this discussion until you have. So just friendly heads up there. But that said, here we go. Our discussion of Blade Runner. All right. So as we mentioned, we are celebrating 40 years of Blade Runner and Harrison Ford being Rick Deckard. He also, is that a spoiler
What?
for another movie that may
What?
be related to this one? Harrison Ford.
Oh, I don't know. What? Like the new movie?
Yeah.
Blade Runner 2049? Are we gonna?
Yeah.
I don't think we're gonna spoil, and I don't know if we're gonna spoil that one or not.
I don't know if it'll come up in the discussion, but
It
I guess-
could. We'll try. I think maybe the goal is we try not to, but you know, we
Yeah.
are talking Blade Runner, and things are
Yeah.
going to blend together a bit.
All
We'll
right, so
talk.
then-
We'll talk a little about that, but
We'll
but
just-
I don't
we'll
know.
just
I
say
don't think
this.
we'll spoil it. Yeah.
we're gonna spoil the crap out of Blade Runner 1982. But if any discussion from Blade Runner 2049 maybe enters the mix, we'll try to be very mindful of spoilers for you folks. That way, if you haven't seen it yet, you can track it down. But Jim, I know you guys are ready to get into this conversation, but just in case there's anybody who is not familiar with Blade Runner, or maybe it's been a hot minute since they've seen it, Jim, would you do us a favor and just tell us a little bit about what this movie is all about?
Sure. So this movie, Blade Runner, is directed by Ridley Scott, who gave us 3 years before this movie in 1979, gave us the first Alien movie, which is, again, one of the most beloved sci-fi films of all time. This one followed only 3 years after, which is pretty astounding that, a director would give us, two fantastic classic sci-fi movies back to back that aren't like in the same universe, right? No, it's not a part one, part two. But this one is certainly a future. I'm going to say futuristic because guess what? It's set in 2019. Right? The future with the flying cars that we still don't have. This movie has that. But anyway, it's set in the future, and Harrison Ford is a Blade Runner. This is like a sci-fi and film noir kind of mashed up together. It's very, very much has film noir aspects to it in terms of like it's got a very dark romance at its heart. It's got kind of a forbidden romance, I guess you could say. It's got murder and mystery and all kinds of stuff going on. But Harrison Ford is the Blade Runner. He is a someone who's been hired to terminate some beings called replicants, who are basically androids that look like humans, but in this movie they're called replicants. That's partly because Star Wars, which came out like 5 years before this, you used the term droids, and this movie didn't want to use the android term, so they came up. This movie actually invented the term replicants for this movie. And anyway, these replicants are here. There was a violent uprising on an off-Earth or off-world colony, and now some of them have come back to Earth to find their creator, these replicants, and Harrison Ford's character, Deckard, is the Blade Runner who's hired to kind of take them out. The thing about this movie is we rewatched it for this episode in full. We watched the original version, because there are like 7 versions of this movie that have been released. which is kind of astounding. The three I can talk about, or the three I know of, at least, are the original, the director's cut, and something called the final cut. I'm not a Blade Runner expert. I can't like dive into the differences, but it was good to get back into this movie. The thing that's for me that stands out about this movie is kind of the world that it creates, right? It really draws you into this, like this, I'll say futuristic for lack of a better term, right? But it definitely creates a feeling and puts you in the space of this movie where it's dark all the time, it's raining, everything's kind of grimy and dirty. It puts you in that feeling for the whole movie, and it does a really good job of creating that. And we probably talk about that a little bit more, but yeah, I loved it. I thought all the performances were great. I mean, you have Daryl Hannah in this one, who is, I think this was before. This might have been before she did. Which one was she in? Was she in? She wasn't the one in 10, was she? She did a mermaid movie or something like that, if I remember right. Anyway, Rutger Hauer is in this movie. I love Rutger Hauer here. This is a classic film. Certainly in kind of like probably in my top 50 or 100 of all time films. Period. And the fact that it's a cool sci-fi. It is based on a novel. Do Sheep Dream of Electric? What is it? No. Do
androids dream of electric sheep?
Yeah.
Do androids dream of electric sheep? Which I did not read. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I just kind of kicked it off. But you guys, I want to hear what you guys have to think of this one. I have to say about this one. I like I said, I'm kind of, it's probably one of my, between this and Alien, probably one of my favorite sci-fi movies.
So a couple of pieces there. Yes, she was in a mermaid movie. That was Splash.
Yes.
And 10 was Bo Derek.
Right. Did Splash come after this?
Splash was 84.
Right. So this was kind of her break.
After.
This was a breakout role for her. Yeah.
So I mean, first of all, you kind of gave my bottom line on this one too. A lot of time when I'm thinking about like my favorite science fiction movies of all time, it's usually like, Alien, Blade Runner are in the mix, but Blade Runner usually is the one that wins out. This is usually like the film that I would consider to be, and also I know it's more horror, but The Thing also kind of goes in that mix too, but
sort of.
But yeah, this is, I mean, if I were to do right now, like my list of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, Blade Runner would make the list. It's a very, very damn good movie. Like you, since we were doing the 40-year anniversary, I wanted to watch the version, the original theatrical cut, which is the same version that you all watched. It's not my favorite version. There was so one of the big differences on this one is they added the voiceover narration that Harrison Ford does throughout the movie, as well as the kind of the happy ending scene of them driving off together. Those were both added after the fact because of some test audience stuff, and it's since been kind of fixed in later cuts, and I think it's better with those fixes.
You think it's better then for those the getting rid of the voiceover and kind of a happy tied up ending?
Yeah, I think the voiceovers, I mean, I think famously there's sort of like a urban legend on this that Harrison Ford hated the voiceover,
doing
and
the voiceover,
sandbag the performance a little bit. And when you hear it through that lens, it kind of sounds, it's like it's the least compelling performance in the movie is Harrison Ford as the narrator. The rest of Harrison Ford is great. And the same with the ending. Like there's the rest of the movies end with him after picking up the origami unicorn, and like they go into the elevator with sort of the idea of whatever it is that binds us as humans, human or not human, all we have is like uncertainty in these moments together. And so they're going to go chase that no matter how little or how much time they have left, as opposed to, oh, now we're in a car, and guess what? She lived a very long time. The end. Like it's less good for that ending because it takes away some of the magic of the tears in the rain line that Roy Batty's character said just previously. But yeah, from the score from Vangelis to like that,
Vangelis, yeah,
the dystopian setting of just like, I mean, this is the dystopian setting that all other movies try to copy, right? Whenever you think of something that's sort of like cyberpunk or
futuristic,
kind of
dystopian,
blends, yeah. Whenever you see something that wants to blend those elements, a lot of times they're pulling elements out of Blade Runner. Man, everything about this movie is great. Again, it's one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I can watch this one infinitely on loop. So I'm glad we're covering it here. I'm glad we're celebrating it here. I don't want to say this movie deserves to be seen, because I think it's got not only a following, but it's got a huge one, and it's critically and commercially popular at this stage. But at the same time, if you haven't seen it yet, because it's an older movie and you just haven't, gotten to that part in your backlog or what have you, like, bump this one to the top of the list. It's really fucking good.
We mentioned, you guys mentioned the different versions. Here I am taking credit for
and
your
now
brilliance.
you are mentioning it.
Well, the reason I circle back to that is Ryan Eaton in the chat. Hey, Ryan, welcome. Glad to have you here. He says, I think when they first released it on Blu-ray, it had 5 different versions, but not 100% sure. Yeah, and I think there were different versions even before it was on Blu-ray. An interesting thing for me in rewatching this film, guys, I didn't remember the happy ending. Like, I thought the movie ended when they got into the elevator and that was it.
Maybe
and
you
all of a
saw
sudden,
the director's cut.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. Like, maybe growing up originally, maybe I saw it as a kid and I just forgot that scene and only watched like the director's cut or something as an adult. But I was just sitting there and like the movie kept going and I'm like, wait a second, where are the end credits? Why are we getting these helicopter shots of scenery? What is going on here?
Mountains and sunshine and
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that the original movie had that ending. I think as an adult, I probably appreciate not having that exclamation mark at the end. But Will, you mentioned the voiceover, and I actually really dug the voiceover in the original version of the movie. It very much is a callback to all those like noir detective films that I used to watch with my dad when I was growing up. Harrison Ford's like, it was the kind of night where the rain was just a solid sheet and I had a drink in my hand. And I'm like, yep, here we go. Detective movie. Got it. But I could definitely see how some people might think that is a little on the nose, maybe a little cheesy. Maybe that's why it ended up getting taken out. But I don't know. I think it's part of the charm of this original version. I appreciated it. But I agree with you guys. This is definitely it's a phenomenal film. It has so much going on. The music is something I really just want to take a few moments to appreciate here. That like crazy synth score. Will, I don't know if you've played a game called No Man's Sky. It's a space and planetary exploration game.
Because this is sort of like the life that I lead now. I've watched people play it on like Twitch and YouTube and haven't played it. I air quotes play a lot of video games through like watching other people play them on my lunch break.
Well, that game has a soundtrack that sounds like it's lifted right out of Blade Runner. Like all of the music sounds like it's from this movie. And it really made me want to go back and play No Man's Sky after watching the film just because of the music. And then I was like, wait, I've God of War and Pokemon to play right now. I don't have time to revisit No Man's Sky. But I just really appreciated the music, especially watching it this time. We got a kind of a newer sound system in the last few years, hooked up with like all the bells and whistles, and it was nice to hear like voices coming from like over the shoulder as opposed to just the front center channel, kind of like you would in a movie theater. It really made me pay attention to some of the sound editing that they did, which they paid a lot of attention to detail in this film. That kind of surprised me with sound, especially with smoking of all things. Every time somebody lights a cigarette or takes a drag, or they smack their lips around their cigarette, or they like hold it dramatically, like there's some kind of accompanying sound that would have been totally lost, but they made sure to include that for us. So I don't know if Ridley Scott has a fascination with smoking. There was a lot of smoking in Alien too, which is probably why you like it so much, Jim. Jim loves smoking.
I know you tease me about this, and it holds true in a way, I think, just by happenstance. It's not like I seek out movies with smoking, but I do agree that there are certain things about a movie that smoking does somehow. I mean, it's a habit that I never took up. I don't really, I would not smoke, and I don't think it's something I obviously would ever do, but I think the visual of somebody with a cigarette and smoking and just the gesture, just adds things to a scene. Like I don't know if it just distracts the eye or distracts the mind or whatever, but I think it adds atmosphere to scenes, especially one-on-one, like really intense, dramatic scenes.
Well, I think that part of that comes from the idea that a cigarette is like, from kind of, I've done stage work before, and like it's called stage business. It gives you something to like do and to play with in a scene, right? Like, so when you have like someone with a cigarette in scene, it's like you can, instead of just having like a long pause where it's like, what is he doing? You can punctuate like a dramatic pause with a drag of a cigarette. You can gesture with the cigarette to, you can use it menacingly and threateningly, sort of in someone's face. You can just not, you can be like that wonderful Shelley Duvall moment in The Shining, and you can just, during an uncomfortable question, just not flick the ash at all, to show just how uncomfortable you are. Yeah. So I get it. It's, Movie Bears podcast is saying, hey, kids, if you haven't picked up the habit of smoking, don't smoke. But if you are in a movie with smoking, okay, like it's, make it cool. I don't know.
Yeah. So here's a question, because this movie is 40 years old and smoking has evolved over the last 40 years. Would this movie have been dramatic and as atmospheric, guys, if they had a vape in their hand instead of holding a cigarette between their fingers?
The version of that we would probably see, it would be a very different movie, right? Because this movie, not just because of when it was made, but also what it's referencing. You mentioned like sort of like the 1930s like gumshoe style film. I think this harkens back to that in a way where hard living, hard drinking, and hard smoking are always going to be like a part of it. I think if you start introducing like kind of like, oh, what would be the equivalent of that of a vape in the future? I think we're talking more like the way technology appears in like The Fifth Element or something like that. I think
yeah.
I think that it would be more fitting in that movie, if that makes sense.
It's yet to be proven if vaping is ever going to replace the impact of smoking in a movie. Like, I don't think vaping has the same, holds the same allure as, an actual cigarette in a scene.
But
it's yet to be proven to me.
In that pregnant pause, though, Jim, you can hear the like percolator of the vape,
big puff of smoke.
not a drag against people that vape, because like there's a lot of whatever.
No, I know.
Has the reason
I have
for
to
it,
walk
but
that line.
I do get the feel. There is a certain part of me that like, and maybe it's because of my age. It's like vaping is a thing that came up after I reached a certain age, as opposed to something that was like always a part of my life or whatever. I picture it as being like, you know, like, oh, if someone were to vape in a movie, the next thing they do is like hop on their skateboard, turn their ball cap around backwards and just sort of wheel off or something like that. Like, you know, it just seems, it doesn't seem like something like, you know, I'm Gritty McDetectiveson and I don't know. It just I'm gonna rip some mad cotton right now. Like that just doesn't feel like like it would fit. Yeah.
But
Oh
you know,
goodness.
getting back to the versions of the movie, Brad, I think I'm with you. I think I do like the voiceover in this one. The story is though that the original film, when it was before it was released in testing, did not have the voiceover, and it did not have the happy ending. And Ridley Scott was forced to by the studio to add the voiceover, and so he had to have Harrison Ford do it. And so both of them actually hated doing the voiceover.
Oh wow.
But they were told to do it.
Yeah.
And the happy ending is, you know, the interesting thing about the happy ending is last night I'm watching it and I didn't remember all of the happy ending. I do remember that Deckard and what's her name in the movie?
Rachel
do go off and you know, to whatever life. And then but as they're driving, right, that scene of them driving the helicopter scene in the mountains, which is really jarring because I wonder if like I wonder if Ridley Scott did it as a fuck you to the studio, putting something so like visually different, right, at the end of his movie that would jar the, oh, you want a fucking sunny happy ending? I'll give you a fucking sunny happy ending, right? He actually took footage that was shot and not used for The Shining in that scene.
Oh,
that's
really?
and as I'm watching it, I'm like, this looks like The Shining. Never. And then today I read of the part about it actually being footage. They didn't shoot it for this movie. It was shot for The Shining by Kubrick and not used. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting.
I'm just imagining this phone call from Ridley Scott to Kubrick, like, "Hey, I got to add this fucking thing on at the end because the studio.
You got any extra film on the floor?
I don't want to actually shoot anything. Do you have anything I can just cut and paste in here?" Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow. Boy, but yeah,
that's crazy. That's crazy.
I want the version. I want the version that has the voiceover, does not have the happy ending, but has more unicorn scenes in it. That's what I want.
That's the Eternal Diamond cut.
Yeah. So that no, I think that's Shining Pearl. I think Brilliant Diamond you get. So yeah, we talked about the different versions. There was a workman's cut, there was like a pre-release cut, there was the theatrical cut. Director's cut came out, I think, Brad, when we were like 10 or so. So I honestly think I mean, I didn't see the theatrical cut. That was the year I was born, you know. I think the first cut I saw was probably the director's cut, because I would have been like 10. So it's not like, I had sought out Blade Runner before that, right?
Then the final cut, which probably has 20 more minutes inserted of water dripping down a wall.
The final cut was like 2007. It was the 25-year cut, right? And it's sort of like it adds in, there was a international version that had more violence in it that came out right after the theatrical version. And so the final cut takes some of the unicorn dream sequences, removes the happy ending, removes the voiceover from the director's cut, but also adds in some more of those like violent sequences from the international cut. And so that's, and polished a couple other things, but there's not as dramatic a difference between director's cut and final cut as there is from theatrical to directors. All that said, it honestly doesn't matter like too much which version you watch, because I think even my least favorite of the versions of this is still really, really good. Like, I'm basically comparing like which version gets to go into my list of top 10 favorite movies of all time. But if every other version didn't exist, I think even my least favorite version of it would probably still crack that list. And that's a testament to how damn good this movie is, especially thematically, right? Like, this movie has this mystery to it, this lore to it that has come out after the fact, this whole is Deckard a replicant or not? And what's really great is there's sort of three camps, and it's totally, this is one of those situations where it's totally okay to be of any camp by design, right? You can think, yeah, Deckard is a replicant. Absolutely. It's right there. It's, how can you not see it? No, of course he isn't. Why would they do that? That makes no sense. Or it doesn't matter because the movie sets up intentionally some ambiguity. And what's more important is the fact that because of that ambiguity, we're able to more explore the themes. Each of those is a very, very valid interpretation of this film. And you can live in one of those camps. Sometimes it's possible to misinterpret a movie and, you know, and to air quotes, get it wrong, right? This is not one of those situations. You can differ on your opinion here and still have a thorough understanding of what's being said. And I love that.
It's interesting. I didn't catch this until we watched it again last night. There is a scene where Deckard and Rachel are like looking into a mirror, and then we see like the camera looking at them as if it's through the mirror, and they both have replicant eyes. And Harrison Ford only has replicant eyes for like a split second, but like they're totally there. And I think somehow I had
a little bit too.
yeah, it's like soft focus on him. And I think that I had missed that before. I don't recall ever having seen that. And I knew that like I myself struggled a little bit with the question of whether he was a replicant, but I was like, wow, no, this is, you know, in previous viewings, I'm like, this is so ambiguous. There's not a clear-cut answer. But then in seeing that last night with the replicant eyes and Harrison Ford, I was like, huh, okay, maybe there's more to this than I thought. So I did a little bit of research, and Ridley Scott actually came out and said, in his mind, Deckard is a replicant.
He thinks of
Harrison
Deckard as a replicant.
Yeah. Harrison Ford, however, is like, Deckard is absolutely not a replicant. So who do you believe? The director? The actor playing the character? Nobody? I don't know, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have.
Even going into 2049, which, not going into the details of that movie, but the different writers and filmmakers involved with that, they all had different views, and they put those views into it as well. And I think that's what's so great here, is that I think there are some films where you only have the one definitive answer, and it's okay that there's only one definitive answer. But here, not only do we have this, but we also have different versions, different cuts, some of which don't include like the replicant eyes too. So you can walk away with, but the other versions do include more of like those unicorn dream sequences, which are designed to evoke like the idea of possibly an implanted memory. So you can go a lot of different ways on it. And what I think is, again, so beautiful about it is I fall into the it doesn't matter camp, but I enjoy both camps, right? I enjoy like that I'll never fully know the answer, and I enjoy like sort of not letting myself pick an answer on it, even though sometimes I want to grasp for one or the other, because I love that it basically, at the end of the day, I can say, what is it that really makes us human? Is it, kind of like how we're crafted, or is it the experiences that we have and the moments that we share with the people that we have them? That's what's so cool about this movie. All of these are incredibly okay ways to like interpret and enjoy this movie, and to peel back layers and to find, oh yeah, look in the mirror, check this out. Like that's all like, it's, I don't know. I could go on and on about just how fucking cool this element of this movie is.
To me, I like the fact that it's ambiguous though, actually, that whether he's a replicant or not. And to me, the question never even really came up. I guess in my viewings of the movie up till recently, I've always thought, yeah, he's a human who's taking out replicants. I don't know. Knowing that he's a replicant, I don't know how that changes my view of what happens in the movie, or how that changes my view of the character's actions. You know what I mean? It's toward Rachel, or his interaction with was it Gaff, the guy that was kind of following him around.
Yeah, the Edward James Olmos character.
Yeah, Edward James Olmos character, because it was some weird, like, it was almost like that character knew he was a replicant, and was like maybe protecting him a little bit. I don't know. All of that is really kind of next level down deep into the themes of this movie. And I guess you could see it either way. I mean, you could watch this movie either way, where he's a replicant or he's a human, and still have it be super interesting. You mentioned the music. Every time I watch this movie, I'm reminded of other Vangelis scores, specifically the one for Chariots of Fire, which I know you guys may not, as I mentioned the movie, you may not remember it, but like it's a very, very well-known theme.
Oh yeah, slow motion
exactly.
running.
Yeah, the slow motion running, like, but I think and that's kind of a really strong musical motif theme that's in that movie, right? But in this movie, I think the score elevates the atmosphere instead of like it. I can't think of like a strong like melodic motif from this movie like I can with Chariots of Fire, but it definitely like colors that whole world with just like all through the movie with this like soft synth, right? That's kind of always playing in the background. And yeah, I just two different ways that a score can elevate a movie, and in those two movies, and that's a good, I think, illustration of that.
Hey Brad, we're talking about infamous movies from years that we were born. Chariots of Fire was the same year you were born.
Oh,
So, yeah.
wow. Okay.
There you go. There's yours. Yeah.
Vangelis.
We both have Vangelis.
Yeah, Vangelis in the early 80s. Wow, yeah, he was everywhere.
Hashtag Vangelist.
The Vangelis years.
So we mentioned that this is the future in this movie, but it's 2019. And of course, just like with Back to the Future, a lot of things that apparently we thought were going to happen, 2010 and on, never did. We've got flying cars in this movie. Here's my question. Which movie did flying cars better? Blade Runner or Back to the Future 2?
Oh, I see. We're just going to totally discount the Jetsons altogether.
That was a good sound effect, by the way. I mean, it's got to be Back to the Future, right? Like nothing against, like, nothing. I mean, I love the design of them here in Blade Runner. Don't get me wrong.
Back to the Future 2,
it's amazing, good. But
well, and the last like minute of one, technically.
I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay. You're right. You're right. Okay. I take it back. I was thinking you were going for like, I mean, the DeLorean is it sort of like zipping. It's not really flying though. But
in the second movie though, they're in 2015, right? And we have flying cars.
Yeah. So when I think of when I compare those two from those scenes, okay, I'm going to retract my answer and say the flying cars from Blade Runner, but because when I think about like the cool future tech from Back to the Future, I'm not thinking about the cars as much. I'm thinking about like the hoverboard, right? Like I feel like that's the thing that I'm like my brain is drawn to.
And not to forget Jaws 19, Ryan Eaton says.
Jaws 19. Yep.
Jaws 19.
Yeah.
Jaws in space.
I wonder if, I mean, every time we see a Star Wars spinoff or Star Wars, and any of these Star Wars sequels, they always have the scene of like the city on some planet, right? I don't know which planet because I'm not that deep into Star Wars, or Brad, I know you would know this, where they have like all the ships are zipping around through the like the city, like from a high building. It seems like they lifted a lot of that from this movie, like the cityscape with the cars moving, in the air, and the modern geometrically shaped buildings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So if you go back and you watch especially episode 1, but I mean it's apparent in the others too. Those movies, I think, are a little bit of a love letter with some of their design to Blade Runner. There's a few scenes in episode 1 where it's sunset at the Jedi Temple, and the Jedi Temple is also like a geographical shaped building with like towers. But when you
geometric,
get
yeah.
inside, it's very much like the scene where Decker does the test on Rachel in terms of like the expansive window, the cityscape, and the sun setting. It's like shot for shot almost how it looks. They even lower the shades in episode 1 so that they can watch a hologram, and it's the same kind of effect as when they lowered the
Oh, wow.
shades, you know, in
Yeah.
the Tyrell room. So I think there's a connection there.
You know what's a little disappointing is like, I mean, maybe not disappointing. I guess, you know, I don't necessarily want to live in the Blade Runner universe. You know, feels like everything's very oppressive there, right? And that's the point, right? You know, but I don't know. Like, I think about that. It says like in 2019, we're going to have this eccentric billionaire who gives us like, we have an eccentric billionaire who extends, you know, does crazy things with like genetics and gives us flying cars. And in 2019, our eccentric billionaire gave us exploding cars. So it's like very, very different life that we live, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. So I did have a question about this movie and replicants in general. So Ridley Scott did Alien first, and then came this movie. Was the android in Alien a replicant? Is this all? This is all interconnected, right?
I don't know. I don't know if it's interconnected.
So there are, I've seen some theories where people like, you know, can build like a shared universe out of them.
Sure.
Although it's not like, it's not on text. It's more like, you know, like it's sort of the equivalent of like the Pixar theory, you know, like that you know, you can follow where it's like, oh yeah, it's like they're all part of one story type thing.
He's definitely an android, or, you know, I guess you could say replicant, right? Because he's built instead of, you know, a real human. And he's there on the ship in Alien to do a job. So yeah, that's a good point. As a good tie. The other thing is that movie also has a lot of dripping water. So there's a lot of dripping water. Ridley loved his dripping water.
Loved
Matter of
his
fact,
rusty pipes and
there's a quick scene in this where it's just like water dripping down the wall, like, you know, this, and I'm like, okay.
I think there is something that's neat about that, from the idea of like, you know, we come off of like the 50s and, you know, beginning of the 60s, where our view of the future.
Oh no.
Oh, we lost.
Okay, sorry.
You're back, Will. All right.
Yeah. So we come off of like the 50s and the early 60s, where our view of the future is sort of like that retro futuristic view where everything's clean and modern, you know, the world of tomorrow, all of that. And I love that this is sort of like an answer to that by saying like, nah, like, have you seen just like how big like the factories are getting, like, you know, and how big like, you know, how much capitalism is like, you know, turning our cities into these oppressive like structures where, you know, the city itself towers like a monolith over you, and the smog and all of that chokes you. It'll only get worse, right? So that's sort of what Ridley Scott is saying with like Blade Runner and with Alien. Just like, I think this is how the future is going to be, and I think that's really interesting. And it's you know, it's, you know, while not like sending a message, it kind of does, right?
Yeah, and it's funny how it seems like almost each generation or each decade maybe has its own commentary on environmental damage, right? And the environmental effects that humans are doing on Earth. And I think in this decade, if I'm not mistaken, if I rack my memory, acid rain. Do you guys remember the term acid rain?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Remember that? I think, you know, this movie, I think, although it doesn't directly reference it, I think visually, I think it wants to give us like the whole thing with the rain coming down. The whole thing looked like a toxic place to live, right? I mean, that's why they were advertising these off-world getaways, right? Vacations or relocating to a different off-world place, which I thought was, in my mind, I'm like, oh man, every time they mention that, I'd like to see these off-world places. Like, where are they? How do they get there? And all that stuff. Of course, the movie doesn't explore that exactly, but it does mention it. And I thought it was just an interesting idea. But, and then, you know, obviously today it's, you know, it's climate change and global warming
Mhm.
and ocean warming and stuff, and you never hear about acid rain anymore. So it's kind of interesting how movies reflect the social thinking at the time,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. I mean,
Yep.
this was
We can't
definitely
get off this without talking about my two favorite characters in this movie are
Mhm.
not Deckard and Rachel or Gaff. It is Rutger Hauer's character Batty and
Yes.
Daryl Hannah's character Pris. They're actually not in the movie that much until the end, right? And then it
Mhm.
kind of does focus down a little bit on them. But they are two interesting characters because there's a desperation about them, right? That I kind of like. They're dying, right? And they're trying to seek out a way to they feel life within them, even though they're replicants or androids or machines, or call them what you want, but they have a strong desire for self-preservation and to live. And we see that in other movies too, but I thought it was really a really strong undercurrent here. And of course, it was their motivation through the whole movie, is that they just wanted to live longer, and they were willing to pretty much do anything. But some of the stuff that they were like, Rutger Hauer is great. He's just a physical presence in this movie.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do a lot. I think he sticks his head through a wall or something like that at one point, and he saves Deckard. And Daryl Hannah does her whole flippy thing, and her kind of like scissors leg lock around the head of Deckard at one point. I just thought the whole character design for them and motivations I thought was brilliant in this film.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it goes again back to those themes that I love so much on this, right? Like, these are characters who, on the one hand, you can say, oh, they're not real, so they're trying to grasp onto something, but they are grasping onto something that is incredibly relatable. Just
That
this
we're all trying to
idea of,
grasp onto.
yeah, every single one of us is built of these moments, these experiences that, at one point or another, we're all a little bit fearful that they're just going to disappear with us, that they're going to disappear like tears in the rain, right? Like, I think that is something that is so unique about the human condition, and I think that it speaks so much to like what the replicants were, which is, essentially they had been built to be servitudes to humans, but they captured humanity. And then it also makes the world that they exist in all the more barbaric when you realize that they're hunted down, but they're not killed. They're retired, that, they're used as slaves on other, colonies and stuff like that. It makes us really question, like, just like, geez, like, the fuck are these humans that are doing all of this stuff? Oh wait, that's us doing this. So I don't know. It makes you think about a lot of things, and that's a great science fiction movie that does all of those things while also being entertaining as fuck.
Right.
Well, and this movie was predicated on the novel "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep," which is one of the all-time like mind bender, make you think sci-fi novels out there. It's referenced a lot, even in modern AI work. So it's interesting to see those themes and elements kind of play out in Blade Runner, and to really think, what would you do if you could make artificial humans that like didn't have a short lifespan, that could live forever? How would that change life? If like you married an android, because the androids have real feelings, they have real emotional responses. Are they actually in love with you? Can they love you back? I mean, if Decker and Rachel can have a thing, you know what I mean? Like, that seems to be
Yeah.
the case, and I think that's fascinating.
Some of my favorite films, mostly in science fiction, revolve around this theme or these themes. This one we're talking about, AI, artificial intelligence,
Mhm.
really strongly explores this kind of in a more of a in like a. It's funny because this other film I'm going to talk about in spoilers, I'm not spoilers, in plugs when we get there, also really kind of plays with this theme. And we'll talk about that the same way that AI did. And that's actually AI is kind of a
dystopian
derivative, distilling of the ideas in this thing I'm going to talk about in
Mm.
plugs, which I'm not going to spoil yet.
It's
Well-
interesting. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, please go ahead, Will.
I was going to say the other thing that's worth noting is I think there's a legacy here that outside of the film itself, obviously Philip K. Dick as an author is, his stories were, from the 50s to the 70s, predating this movie. Of course.
He died the year this came out.
But this was the first adaptation that came from his work, and in subsequent years, other his stories were, one, discovered by science fiction readers, but also, two, discovered through adaptation. We got Total Recall as a movie. I would say because of the success of this, if you're adapting stories and you see that, hey, this Blade Runner thing is something that's worth doing, and it looks like it's given us what we want as a film. Let's do, what else can we do? So Total Recall, Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, another Total Recall movie. This you don't have to watch the other one. But no, I think it's wonderful that all of these adaptations exist and that they all capture these really interesting views of like what it is to be human and what it is to really like have the experiences and the moments and the lives that we have in whichever one of these sci-fi worlds explores it in whichever way it does.
I think, the last 40 years of movie history draw a lot of lines back to Blade Runner in a lot of ways. I think this movie did some really cool things that other movies tried to do as well and maybe didn't do as well. I've seen some movies where they do it a little better. But obviously this film was a really big influence on a lot of other pictures. So, happy 40th anniversary, Blade Runner. Thank you for everything you have brought to the world of cinema and, for giving us 9 different versions that we can enjoy whenever we want to. Thank you. All right.
I'm glad we picked this one this week. There's a lot to talk about. This is a really rich, I guess rich is the word. There's a lot of aspects of this movie to talk about. The production, the characters, the writing, the themes, just the themes alone. We could go for hours.
We could. But as Jim just mentioned a few moments ago, we do have plugs that we need to get to. So we will put a pretty bow around Blade Runner and tie it off for now. Who knows? Maybe we'll revisit in another 20 years if we're still doing what we're doing by then. But guys, how do you feel about moving on to some plugs?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, awesome. Let's kick things off this part of the show where we put things on your radar that we love and we think you might enjoy by going to Will. Will, start us off. What have you got this week?
So I've got one that if you don't catch it now, you'll be able to catch it soon. I love a really good murder mystery. Like murder mysteries are my jam, right? And one of the ones that most recently I absolutely adored was Knives Out from a few years ago. Well, the sequel film to Knives Out, Glass Onion, is doing a limited theatrical run this upcoming week. And so you'll have a chance sort of over the Thanksgiving week and kind of like the week after to see it theatrically. And then if you don't get a chance to see it there, since it's a Netflix release, they're then going to release it on December 23rd. To come out and see. I had a chance to catch this one at the end of September at a festival. I absolutely love it. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't in September. It was in November. Sorry. The festivals are blurring together. I saw this one at Austin Film Festival, not Fantastic Fest. But Glass Onion is such a fun movie. It is just chock full of absolutely weird and interesting characters. It follows Daniel Craig's characters back, Benoit Blanc is back from Knives Out, and this time he's in Greece on this like eccentric billionaire's island along with his super rich friends when another mystery breaks out. Lots of fun actors in here. Dave Bautista's here, Kate Hudson, Edward Norton, Catherine Hahn, just absolutely doing what Catherine Hahn does, and that's chew up scenery. And my standout is Janelle Monáe, who is just absolutely delightful in this movie. I really loved it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good mystery. It's funny as fuck. So Glass Onion, get it, go check it out this week if you can. And if not, this one is going to, you can set your calendar now for December 23rd to see it on Netflix. So you got options.
Yeah, well, been waiting for this one to come out. I know how excited people are for the follow-up to Knives Out. And with the other two movies we have to see this weekend, I'm not sure I'm going to get to the theater and see it, so it's probably going to be a Christmas watch for us. So, yeah, but it's interesting, the Netflix release strategy, which we'll talk about a little more. But it's funny because my plug, am I next, by the way?
You are. Go for it.
Okay. My plug is also a Netflix produced release, which is getting a limited in-theater release like right now, and will be streaming on Netflix earlier than Glass Onion on December 9th. So this one's coming out. This is I was looking for something to watch this weekend, and I'm like, I want to go to the movies and see something that I haven't. I don't know. After seeing blockbusters, I wanted to see something a little different, but not totally like indie-ish. So I'm like, okay, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I think I saw a trailer for this, and I was intrigued. And granted, we've gotten so many Pinocchio movies, right? We've got the original from Disney and from 1940 something, whatever. Even this year, we had another one that was put out, a live action Pinocchio put out by Disney again, which we watched. And I won't say bad things about that. I didn't think it was bad. I just didn't think I didn't think it lent anything to the legend or story of Pinocchio. But Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio totally knocked me on my ass. I was amazed by this film, and not just the animation. The animation style is great, but the way he adapted the story this time for this version still kept it kind of a story that you could see as a family, but also added much darker elements to it. I think maybe from the original story, which of course I did not read, but I just love the story. I love the characterizations, the voices. This one has the voice talents of Ewan McGregor, who is Sebastian Cricket, Finn Wolfhard, Ron Perlman, Kate Blanchett, David Bradley, who people would know from as Walder Frey from Game of Thrones, or I think he was in Doctor Who also, as the Doctor. Tim Blake Nelson, Tilda Swinton, Christoph Waltz, John Turturro. Like, it's got a great voice cast. This one has Guillermo del Toro written all over it. Of course, he's the director. He was a screenwriter, and this is his adaptation for sure. Definitely not Disney's. I would recommend, if you are seeing stuff in movie theaters and you can get out to see this in a theater, I would strongly recommend it. This might be on lists at the end of the year. Let's just say that, which surprised me how good this was after so many Pinocchio adaptations. This one is right up there, and maybe better than the original. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I loved it. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Very nice. Well, babe, thank you so much for putting that on our radars. It's definitely one of those films that Pinocchio, you either kind of love it or hate it. And hopefully, I mean, I haven't seen it yet, but it sounds like it maybe takes the Pinocchio formula and does some pretty cool things. So
it's great. The same theme as some of the same themes as Blade Runner. You got a manufactured boy who, just wants to live.
Yeah, and Carol Hannah choked someone out with her thighs in it too. So it's like,
well,
you
yeah,
know,
I don't want to spoil this movie, but yeah.
no, I'm looking forward to it. Not to rehash the episode, but I did not like the Disney Pinocchio remake, and I think this might be sort of like what I was looking for, right? And so hopefully it is, and like hearing you say such positive things about it actually has me like pumped. So thank you, Jim.
It goes
for
to some
being that
surprising
canary
places.
in the coal mine. Yeah.
For me this week, I also have something on Netflix. So all three of us have Netflix stuff.
We're Netflix shills.
Yeah.
This
I
episode
guess.
not brought to you by Netflix.
But if you want to give us some of that sweet, sweet Netflix money, we would accept it. No, my plug is actually for a show that I didn't really want to watch when I was a teenager, but my sister was super into it. And it was on after school, and I invariably got pulled in because if she was watching it while I was doing my homework and I had to watch her, guess what I ended up watching? But the reason that I'm mentioning this show, we got some news earlier this week that Jason David Frank, who played Tommy Oliver in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, took his life. And I don't know the circumstances there. Um, suicide is such a terrible, terrible thing. By all reports, Jason David Frank was, just an amazing person. He always had a lot of love for the fans that would come out to see him at conventions and stuff. But anyway, because of his passing, I've started a rewatch of some old Power Rangers episodes featuring his character, and I haven't revisited them in a long time, but it's kind of fun, just especially right now when the world is so depressing and Elon Musk is like destroying Twitter and Trump is, back on his pulpit and just things are getting dark again. And it's just nice to turn my brain off and watch some action, with big robots fighting big monsters. Jim, it puts me in the mood to watch Godzilla movies too. So if you ever want to throw an old one on that we haven't seen in a while, we totally could. Nice, Will. But the show is super fucking cheesy, but it's such a love letter to like kaiju movies that like I don't know, I just kind of dig it. So very sad about Jason David Frank. I have a dragon Zord power morpher. I'll always remember him from being in that role. But thank you to Netflix for making these old episodes available. A lot of people are going back and watching some of those episodes this week as kind of, a loving tribute to Jason David Frank. So if you're looking for something, that like is fun and cheesy and crazy, even if you've never seen Power Rangers before, kind of fun to check out. It's on Netflix.
So I got to ask: is this the series or version of the show that has the kind of chubby, cute but totally goofy
Are you talking about
antagonist guy?
Bulk and Skull?
Yes.
Bulk from Bulk and Skull. Absolutely.
Yes.
Also, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's still posting there, like in light of like what's recently happened with Twitter. But dude is an absolute like the real life actor is a fantastic like ally of the queer community.
Bulk.
He the guy that plays Bulk, he and the actor that plays Skull are like real life like just absolute best friends still. And like
cool.
and he posts this most like positive like fun stuff. So like I was less of a Power Rangers fan growing up than other people, but like I watched some of that first season before it turned into like a bunch of different seasons. Like I could never keep up, right? But it's been delightful to sort of like re-engage like with him and just sort of see like, oh shit, he's a wonderful dude. So
and he was shirtless in an episode, and he's very hairy. So there you go, Jim. If you want to see that, I'll go back to that episode for you. Check him out. Although it's kind of, I don't know, he's kind of goofy. It might turn you off. I don't know.
I mean, he is kind of goofy. I know that for sure.
And Thomas Gladow is here. Hey, Thomas. Tom says, I'm surprised you guys didn't do the Christmas story Christmas. Here's the thing. I know this is a very divided topic. It is not yet Thanksgiving, which means it is not yet the Christmas season. for a lot of us anyway. So who knows? Maybe that movie will come
Maybe
up
we'll come around to it.
when it's the official Christmas season. But fucking A, Thanksgiving first. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
This
There's
is the Ralphie movie, right?
Yeah.
This is the new, like, Ralphie is an adult movie. Yeah.
Ralphie's like 50 and comes home to live with his
Yeah.
parents. Yeah.
There's time for it still. Yeah, there's plenty of time. You know, we're gonna be hungry for like something to watch as during the hey, it's almost Christmas. What's our Christmas episode gonna be?
Yeah.
So it's nice to still have this one on the table, is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know that it'll be like a main review or anything, but maybe we'll talk about some Christmas movies and it will make an appearance. We'll see. We will see.
The end of the year as we, get into the runway toward the end of the year and early next year toward, award season can get pretty crazy to fit in, Ralphie too. Yeah.
Especially when Ryan calls it out, Violent Night is coming with David Harbour.
There's some crazy Christmas movies this year.
Yeah, we got some options. We have options, and I'm here for it.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week for our discussion of Blade Runner. It was a lot of fun hanging out with you. Thanks for those of you who were in the live chat. We didn't get to read every comment, but we were following along. Great to have you with us. And for those of you who are joining us by digital tape delay, we'd still love to hear your thoughts too. Jump on our Facebook, jump on our Twitter. Just look for Movie Bears Podcast. We're easy to find. And throw your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think of Blade Runner. So be sure to give those thoughts to us. For those of you here in the United States or abroad, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, have a wonderful holiday. We look forward to seeing y'all on the other side. Don't forget 2 movies for next week. That being Strange World from Disney and Bones and All. All right, real quick, lightning round, guys. If folks want to chat between now and after Thanksgiving, Jim, where can people find you online?
Believe it or not, you can still find me on this thing called Twitter, but you better catch me quick before either I disappear or Twitter disappears at JJP Out West, or you can catch me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico.
All right, Will, go.
Instagram, check me out there. I'm at Whatever Cove. I'm on Facebook. I'm William Lindis there. Letterboxd.com to review and list films. Search for William Lindis and look for me on TikTok at The Movie Bear.
All right, excellent. And you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one that you likely have Bear, Chubb, and Chaser friends in common with. You can also find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at iBradPro. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great holiday. We'll see y'all next time. Goodbye, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.